Welcome to the Lightforge. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps, and has it been a week already? Has it been a week since the last Lightforge? Because it feels like a millennia. It feels like a lifetime ago.
You know
Um,
why it feels like a lifetime ago?
well, maybe it's because I haven't been sleeping that
Yeah, I was
much.
about to say, you have had more conscious hours this week than 99% of the weeks in your life.
Probably. Has it been worth it? Absolutely. Will I say that in like 20 years where I feel the effects of the week alone? Probably not. But for
Oh my
now, I am
god.
alive. I'm
You know, there
sitting
was
here.
like a portion of the chat that thought you were actually dead on Saturday when you didn't show up for the Overwatch stream because you had played too much Overwatch in the week before that you were passed out and unable to like physically play.
I certainly felt dead, and I wished for a slow and satisfying release from this life. I'm like, you know what? I played enough Overwatch. I guess that's it for me. I had a good run. Goodbye, world. But then,
This is short-term thinking, right? Like, if you had taken care of a bit better of your body, you could have played Overwatch for like years. But you blew it all on the first 5 days.
hey, live fast and leave a good-looking corpse, right? There you go. But now, we've stabilized a little bit, and we're back to talking about the good old wizard poker that we started off our video game adventures with.
Yeah, it's what the Life Forge is about. Hearthstone Arena.
Yes, definitely. So, Adokta, what are we talking about this week? What's
All
going
right,
on?
all right. So a hugely exciting thing happened in the Arena community this week. I was on Value Town, um, and that's it. No, I was on Value Town with Crip and Ratsma, and Value Town's hosted by Chanman. It's a podcast. It's also on YouTube, so go check it out. It's usually about rank play. I think Raynad is the primary person who's on it with Chanman. But they try really hard to do an arena episode at least once every meta to kind of like catch up their viewers on what's happening in the arena, and we're very happy to be invited. But the really exciting news, and we have like a lot of good discussion there, you should definitely check it out. But the more exciting news, and I'm sure you guys already know this if you follow, but if we are your only news source for the arena, this is something to know, which is that the grandfather of all Hearthstone arena play, or one of the two grandfathers, I would say it's Crip and Trump. But Crip has gotten, like in the earlier part of this week, 8 12-win runs out of 9. It was like 5 in a row, then one that wasn't a 12 win, and then another 2. And people kept counting for like 110 purposes, even though like there wasn't the class diversity, and 110 is a random set of rules. When like people, it's so weird, right? People were just counting like how close he got to 110 or how much over 110 it was over, whether it was qualifying for 110. Like, why focus on that? Right? He got 8 12-win runs and 9 wins. That's
Like,
a
let's focus on the
ridiculous feat.
fact that it's just a great accomplishment. Why try
Yeah.
to peg it into this arbitrary like thing, right? And yes, if you accomplish that arbitrary thing, which is the 110, it is an amazing accomplishment. But why can't we just call an amazing accomplishment an amazing accomplishment,
Right.
right?
Like, there are other amazing accomplishments that are not
Right.
110 that are, like, as hard, if not harder, to accomplish. Like, I think what Crip did was harder than 110. Um, so he didn't use, like, I think he used 5 classes or 6 classes overall, and he ended up with
6.
113 out of 10. I don't know, some ridiculous number.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. But the more important part is that 8 of 9 runs went 12 wins. And I think half of them were, like, rogue runs. He's this leads to our like discussion later on about what's better in the old gods meta, rogue or mage. But Crip now definitely believes that it's rogue for good reason. If I went that many rogue 12-1 runs in a row, I might be swayed too. But yeah, so that's what happened. Incredible feat that Crip pulled off, and I think we like didn't mention this last time, or maybe we did, but just to mention it again in case we were like glossed over it. Someone else had actually completed the 110 challenge between 2 beers and now, and that's Meth, who is a Ukrainian streamer. He streams in Russian, and he's been like somewhere near the top of the arena leaderboards in terms of like just streamer leaderboards, in terms of
Yeah.
wins per run for like ever. And no one, we just don't know. Like we mention him a lot as like the guy who has a ridiculous record playing all classes, and we just don't know like how he plays or what his strategies are because he doesn't stream in English. But he pulled off a 110
Yeah.
under the normal rules.
If you want to talk about and people speculate on, oh, who's the top arena player, Meth has to be in the conversation.
Yeah.
He plays, he doesn't play all the classes exactly evenly, but if you look at his averages for his like not top play classes, they're still
Yep.
elite averages. He doesn't sort of like not play them because he's bad at them, right? Like
Mhm.
I haven't checked his stats in a while, but it's like he doesn't play
They're
that.
thankfully not as good as they used to be, but they're still
They're
ridiculously
still
amazing.
ridiculous. Like he is still better than a lot of his peers with his bad classes, and
Yep.
so like his average is just ridiculous. Like
Yep.
an amazing player that yeah, I think just because he streams in a different language doesn't get as much attention, but congrats to him. And it seems like things are moving and shaking in the arena scene, which is always nice. Like it's always nice to have arena news to present to the you know
And this is
audience.
stuff that just people have not done before. Like,
Yeah.
so a lot of people are worried that arena is getting filled too much with really good players, and I think a lot of people have felt it, especially towards the end of the LoE meta. But then you have these streamers doing things that they have, they've just frankly never done before in their career, and no one has before, or maybe because there was just no focus on getting these kinds of things. But I think a lot of people are try hard when they do their arena runs, especially when you're a streamer and everyone's watching you and you're supposed to be good, and it hasn't been done before. So I think there could be a case to be made that maybe arena's getting harder overall, but at least if you like figure something out or go on a really like good run, like you can still do things that is better than what you could have done before based on like just mastering the arena even more, right? Like we're talking about top arena players here. We're all on like a very high level of understanding of the game, but it just shows that we can still improve, all of us.
Yeah, of course. It's really obvious when you do co-ops with other players, exactly the number of differences that top players make, right?
Hmm.
And it's kind of astounding how everyone can average very high wins while doing
Making different decisions. This is
making
an entire game about decision making, and you do a
making
co-op
very
with
different
someone, and
decisions.
you're
Yeah.
like, okay, you'll win 8.5 wins per run with Rogue. I win 8.5 wins per run with Rogue. Why do we not agree on any of the first 5 moves?
Right.
Like,
Right.
what that tells me is that there are two ways to get 8.5 wins per Rogue, doing totally different things. So that out of like I don't know, maybe like 150 combinations of moves that you could do in the first 4 moves, at least 2 are right. Probably if you talk to even more streamers, maybe like a total of like 4 or 5 variations would be right and totally okay. So this is also not to make people who are not getting so many wins with Rogue feel bad, but it just means that it's not that those 5 are all the best. One of them's definitely better than the other ones. We just haven't figured out which one it is yet, and we're still going for that.
Yep. So, all right, is it time to dig deep into the deep fried meta?
Let's. I mean, I just want to talk about one more thing before we dig into like Rogue and Mage, which is personal to me, and I have been thinking about it a lot, especially after the 110 challenge came out. At least personally, I don't go on ridiculous streaks. Like I go on good streaks when it comes to like my average, right? Like in any period of like 20 wins, like 20 runs, I could be averaging like 10.5 wins per run, and that happens somewhat frequently. And it means my overall average always does really like, not always, but usually is pretty good. Like right now in OG, I'm averaging, I don't even know, like definitely I think the average that I track, including off stream games, is more than 8.5 wins. But it doesn't. I haven't been playing all classes evenly. I've been like kind of avoiding Hunter on purpose. I'll even it out in a bit. But it's still sort of even. Like I do play Priest a lot. But which is really good, right? Like playing a wide variety of classes, 8.5, more than 8.5 wins with a decent for like 1 month kind of sample size. But if you wanted to count my 12 win runs, like no matter which way you split it, I think at one point I had gotten like three 12 win runs in a row with Shaman, and then I couldn't pull the fourth one off. Or I got like three 12 win runs in a row, and then I didn't get four 12 win runs in a row. But at no point, I think, in my entire time playing Hearthstone, while getting averages that are, in the same ballpark, sometimes better, sometimes worse than these people making the headlines, I have just never gotten close to it. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, I never got 8 12-win runs and 9 wins, go Crip. I'm saying I never got 6 12-win runs in 7 runs. I never got 5 12-win runs in 6 runs. I may have done that, but definitely not. But definitely not 6 12-win runs and 7 runs, much less 8 and 9. That's just never happened. I've never gotten like Ratsma had like 6 12-win rogue runs in a row on stream. And one of our mods over the weekend just hit 6 12-win runs with Rogue in a row and was trying to go for a seventh and had unfortunately failed. Dr. Stein, we feel for you. Um, but I've never gotten close to that. I don't think I've ever done more than 3 12-win runs in a row with Rogue. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. So no matter how you're slicing the way I'm doing runs, I don't go on these amazing streaks.
So the thing about streaks is part of it will be due to your playstyle, and part of it will be just Hearthstone on a big level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can look at Hearthstone in terms of like, oh, my past 10 runs, my past 50 runs, my past 100 runs, my past whatever. And Hearthstone is going to be a game in which you technically should have those like very like if you look at it in terms of probability, you will have a prolonged good streak and prolonged bad streak at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And overall, it would stay like pretty similar, but you're going to have a high peak and a very low valley at some point. And I think what happens is, even though we play, we've been playing for years now, the amount that we play is not that often, right? In comparison to these other streamers, we just have like other stuff that we're doing. For example, with the Lightforge, and I think part of the reason like you haven't seen these streaks, some percentage of that has to do with your play style, right? It obviously does, but some of it I think has to do with our small sample size in comparison to number one other streamers, and number two just just kind of like the macro Hearthstone arena game, like period.
Yeah, I mean definitely. But yeah, I mean I don't have like a terribly good explanation for it. I do go on bad streaks, same as anyone. But my overall average I think is keeping up, right? Like I don't know. I feel like we're some of the people that play all classes evenly and do incredibly well with it. Like if you were talking about like if I had started with a 110 challenge, I were to place bets, I think we'd get pretty good odds of pulling it off. Like less than other people due to sample size issues. We don't play as much on stream as other people, but I think we get decent odds. But I've gotten nowhere close to it, right? Like I've been soft trying for it in the sense that I've just been incorporating it in my normal streams since like January, and I think I've hit like 71 was like the highest, or like 76. I don't know. But nowhere like this is not like in the night. It's not like I almost missed it, right? Like immediately after the challenge was announced, Ratsma almost got it, Hafu almost got it, and then Two Beers got it, right? Well within 1 month.
That's fair.
And
Yeah.
neither of us were really close, despite our averages being like the same as or better than any of those guys. So I don't know. It's definitely I think a mental because okay, it can't be a skill thing. Is kind of what I'm saying, right? So it has to be a mental thing because there's only two things, or it could be a luck thing, and I'm making way too much out of it due to like sample size stuff. But it has never happened to me in my entire time playing Hearthstone. So the sample size isn't like 1 month of me playing Hearthstone or like a few months. It's the entire more than 2 year period that I've been playing.
Yeah, but I think that if you're looking at it in terms of these streaks, we still don't play enough. I don't play enough. You don't play enough. Our sample size is still very minuscule. And part of it, like I said, part of it I think is sort of play style in terms of like because if you go for the 110, you have to try to swing for those home runs, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't play it safe, and you still have to play very well, but you can't play it safe. And I think part of it is, it just goes back to the sample size as well. Like these players who, the first two players, like Thratsma and Hafu, who, like, there's no doubt about their skill, right? Like
Yep.
they are top arena players. And number two, they also stream a lot and play a lot of arena, right?
Mm-hmm.
Two Beers completed it, but that was kind of, that's kind of the exception, right? Like he
Right,
doesn't
right.
play a lot of arena, and that's an understatement. He like basically doesn't play the arena. But if you're looking at sort of, the few arena streamers are well known in the community versus the field at large, you bet on the field at large, right? Because that's just
Right.
more probability from everyone else rather than these players. So I think that like you're sort of surprised at not going on one of these streaks. I'm just like, if you look at this game overall, I don't think that's too surprising, right? And
It's any ever. Like 2 years. Like you're looking at a small slice of this, but it's not like it's happened in the past and people just haven't noticed. It's been, I don't know. I think there's some kind of a mental aspect to it, is what I like. I don't think I'm just getting terribly unlucky. It's possible, but I don't think that's the case. I think there's probably something in my head that like either the pressure gets to me after a number of 12-win runs, or I just don't care about it. Like, or I don't like take it to the next level of focus. That other people are like, oh my god, I'm on a 12-win streak, and they maybe get even better, and I don't move it to the next level because every run is like the same to me, or that I actively like get nervous. I don't feel like I am, but I think we have kind of enough evidence that it's definitely more than just a suggestion. I think it may be something that I'll personally like.
it's definitely interesting. But like, this is a topic in which we touch upon, and at the end, we're just like, we're not sure.
Right, right. Okay. Oh, I mean, anyway, that's kind of how like yeah. So let's move on to like the more interesting debate, rather than psychoanalyzing Adwikta's brain and why he can't go on long win streaks despite having a good record. Let's talk about and oh, someone did this on Arena HS. I actually have, I think, the second highest 12-win run percentage out of any streamer. So I am getting 12 wins. That's why like the record is there. But I am definitely, and we're getting 12 wins more frequently than other people, but just not all together. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think there's something there. Okay, let's talk about deep fried meta, where we deep fry the meta.
All
Today's
right.
topic. Today's topic is the rogue and the mage and the best OG class. And I absolutely love that the conversation is now basically between rogue and mage.
Yeah, Paladin. Okay, so let's answer that question. Like, why have we just ditched Paladin? Why is it not in contention anymore? Because in LOE, I think it was part of the conversation, right?
Oh yeah,
It was part of the conversation, and
I
you had
think
a
we were
big.
kind of controversial for kicking it down to number 3 back in a TGT.
Yeah, I remember that. And now it's like I think um I think with the Paladin, you really can't make an argument that it's on the same class as Rogue and or Mage. And we can talk about. We have sort of talked about what's so powerful about those classes, but why don't you explain sort of why the Paladin has sort of fallen into the next tier?
Yeah, I mean the Paladins fall into the next tier because the card quality that they got, one, was slightly worse than Mage and Rogue. Um, Slightly worse may be an understatement. It was like just worse, right? It was maybe like one tier worse than Mage and Rogue, so that didn't help. And then what also didn't help, what really didn't help, is that Keeper of Oldemon got diluted. And all their cards got, like, they have a powerful hero power, but Paladins also have a lot of powerful cards. Like, more so than, I think, Rogue. And maybe more so than Mage, kind of, maybe even compared to Mage. Rogue always lived on not really how amazing their top cards are, but that they have a very consistent number of very good cards, and also very bad cards. But then, and also the hero power. for the Paladin, it really, like any conversation in which we're talking about, oh, Paladin's OP, it has to do with specific cards, right? It's like Muster, Cockhammer, which mini bot back in the day. And those cards are all getting diluted, and they will continue to get diluted. Uldaman, more recently. And Uldaman lost its offering bonus and got diluted. So the new card that was taking over the spot, Divine Strength, was never at the same level as those cards, right? Like, it was always like kind of a little bit stepped down, and as we're playing with it, it may be like a little bit even below that, right? Like still a premium card, but not like a game-changing card. And the Paladin is just missing its really good cards. On the other hand, the Mage and the Rogue got better cards, right? Mage has Twilight Flamecaller?
Yes,
Twilight Flamecaller. I still don't know the names of these. They're all the same. It's all Twilight. It's all faceless.
Yeah, everything is Twilight. Everything and
Old Gods. They're all the same. So you have that card. You have the Faceless Summoner, which is another, not terribly inspiring card, but just very powerful stat stick, right? And they're always going to make you just end up with a more high value deck. And high value decks are kind of where the meta's going, right? Rogue has a removal. Removals are insanely amazing in this meta. And it's not even like a small removal, right? It's like 5 damage. That's like mid-size removal. So it's very good. Paladin's got a powerful card, but it's a tempo card. It's a 1-mana tempo card. So if you can snowball it, it's great. But if you can't snowball it, doesn't really like fit into every deck in an amazing kind of way. Right, yeah, it's always good. It's sometimes amazing, but now you're getting into the situation where it's not like the Mage and Rogue cards.
No, the Mage and Rogue cards just got so much better, and we talked about this a little bit, and in sort of a format in which flexibility is very good, right? And other classes are getting more and more flexible in terms of damage options, in terms of just what they're able to do. The fact that Paladins are still inflexible, but they have powerful cards, and now you take away a powerful card and they like are a little bit more inflexible, it doesn't work, right? We're at the point where, like, if you look back at Classic, all the classes were inflexible in some ways, like very much so, just because your cards were very limited. A lot of times you're just playing with these neutral cards, and it was like very, very clunky. And now things can be very clean, right? It's a little bit messy in that there's a lot of cards, but a lot of classes have like so much flexibility in what they can do. And Paladins just really lack that. Like, they can always snowball with their buffs, like you said, but that's draft dependent. That's sort of mana dependent as well, and whether or not you draw them, which is really kind of different from the options that Rogue has, and the value that Mage has, with all of the removals as well. So
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, okay, so Paladin's out. Like, it's very clearly out. I don't think there's any doubt by people that Paladins are not really in the top tier anymore. We've always had it a step below Mage and Rogue, but now the gap is pretty wide, I think.
Yep. Okay. All right. So out of the top 2 classes, what do you got number 1?
Mage. I think it's pretty clearly Mage in this meta. It's a control kind of, it's not really a control meta, it's a slow meta. It's a meta where people taunt. It's a meta where there are more turns, and you can get past it by going really fast with removals, or you can get past it by going really fast and snowball out of control because there's no removals anymore. And definitely no board clears. But if you don't do that, and those are hard to do, it's hard to draft decks like that. Like, you may have gotten lucky and drafted a bunch of decks like that, but then you won't get it in some other cases. And at the end of the day, you need a lot of your, like, the bulk of your average, right? Like, if you're not just looking at chances to get to 12-win runs, if you're looking at your total average, the Mage has such a high floor on what it does in a value-centric game, right? Such a high floor. It has the hero power that's infinite card advantage that also does not hurt your it has the additional good class cards that were added. It used to be number one for a good reason. It used to be a clear number one for a very good reason, because the meta was slower back then, because people missed 2 drops more. All of those things are back with a vengeance, and so Mage is back with a vengeance. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the only reason we're having this conversation with Rogue is because of Shadow Strike. um, which is fair, but I don't think that kind of carries the class when the meta has so many downsides for the class that exploits the rogue's like natural weakness in a an average rogue deck rather than a good rogue.
Yeah. So I also agree, and I think it's pretty close. So just to be clear, I think that Mage is number one by like a very small margin, right?
And you have been moved here from rogue is number one in LOE, right? Because
Yeah.
I think that's where we were different. I thought at LOE Mage was even like a sliver above Rogue, and now Mage is definitely above Rogue. Like not like a tier above Rogue, but I would say it's more consistent. And in TGT, for the record, we were both very high on Rogue over.
Yes. So like we're of the we're pretty similar here, although the gap I think is different for us. Some people though, I think believe that Rogue is number one, and I'll just play
Oh,
sort of the
I think it's 50-50 right now. If you talk to the top arena players, whether Rogue or Mage is number one.
yeah, and I'll just make the argument for Rogue because I understand. Shadow Strike is just an insane card, right? Giving an offering bonus to a mana efficient removal is just insanely good. And rogues also have Journey, like what was that card? Journey to Darkness or something, where you basically, it's a card that lets you find late game, right? And lets you find a death rattle. And we all know how good death rattle cards are.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about Shadow Strike is when a meta slows down and other people are sort of like putting down 1 minute, putting down these taunts. The reason that rogues work and hunters don't really work is number one,
Yes.
like hunters are, they have way less options, right? We always talk about options in terms of what you can do with your hero power, number one, and what you can do with all of your class cards. Rogues have efficient removals in Shadow Strike and Sap. Assassinate is sort of a safety blanket, right? Where yes, a deadly shot is good, but they have a 1/1 and they
I
have
don't know
the
that I don't know that a deadly shot is good in this meta, because you could have a lot of things floating around for very little, and you don't have the removals to remove it. Like
exactly
there's still
like
these carryover cards from like TGT and like Nax and whatever that just like fill the board still.
right, right. Like as a hunter, you have less options to dealing with the other stuff that the rogue has, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why like sabotage with a rogue is still like pretty good because you can deal with all the
Right.
other stuff and then
Mm-hmm.
you sabotage. With
Exactly.
hunter, you have less tools to deal with other stuff and then deadly shot as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, deadly shot is still a very good card. And if they put down that one bog creeper, you deadly shot and go. But the difference between why sort of like a hunter is one of the worst classes and a rogue is one of the top classes, just because even though the meta has slowed down and the hunter and the rogue are sort of doing the same thing in which, they want to get on the board early and then capitalize on their board lead, right?
Mm-hmm.
The rogue just has all these removals that are that number one you can aim, like a lot of times with the hunter you can't aim the removal, and number two you're just able to impact the board a lot more.
Yes.
And if you're able to flood out early and you have the responses, basically you're playing aggro control the
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
you're
Aggro
supposed to.
control.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just insanely powerful against a lot of these classes that even if
Anything.
yeah, anything. Even if they want to go faster, they can't because their
Yeah.
draft doesn't allow them to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So the rogue is just in an amazing spot because even if they didn't have the sort of bonus to Shadow Strike, they still would have like a good amount of removals. But if you give them this bonus and it's like a semi-large removal, right?
Right.
And
It's like it's perfect for the meta,
it's
right?
perfect
Like,
for the meta. Yes. So that's why a lot of people will say that Rogue is number one, and I completely understand. And that's why I think it's so close. But for me, in the end, Mage has the tiny bit of edge because the Rogue still gets into these situations late game where are you going to use your hero power? Are you not going to use your hero power? Like they're like barely floating there, and then
Mm.
you just kind of don't have enough, right? And then
Well,
you're kind of
you
forced to use your hero power to still clear the board, which you never want to do at that point of the game.
yeah, like your risk is it's about risk. And at the end, the rogue just has to take more risks, which is fine. Good players are are better at risk evaluation, and they'll end up better for it. But the risk is still there. A good player can't eliminate any risk. It just knows at what point it's taking what kind of risk and at what point it's worth it to take that kind of risk. But what is risk but a percent chance that you will lose the game, right? And so the rogue continuously has to make these kinds of decisions where you're always just taking more risk than other classes. Always at the end of games. If you don't finish them, if you don't have a deck that can finish them off in an early way, you're just taking these chances at the end, and you have to, and they're good, right? The odds are good for you, but they're still odds. You would much rather play with more certainty and like it's a form of RNG. It's like controllable RNG almost, which is good for better players, and not like a flaw in game design or anything. But it does still limit the rogue. What I like to say about rogue v mage is if you gave me two of the best players and you gave them each like average rogue decks and average mage decks, the mage is gonna lose so bad to the rogue, so bad. But
Yep.
that's not what the arena's about. The arena for very good players is about taking care of people who are worse than you, generally, and then doing okay at least against players who are about the same level as you because like you'll see them eventually on your way up, and being able to have a good mix of taking care of really great decks and taking care of poor decks, and that amount of what I'll call win condition flexibility that the mage has, the rogue really doesn't have. And so there's always that hesitance, from me at least, to say that rogue is the best because you are rolling the dice more than mage, and you have to.
You have to, right? And you're sometimes like you're happy to take those chances, but it goes back to the philosophy, right? If you're a good player, you want to reduce the up times that you need to take those risks and just say overall I'm going to take the low variance plays and like the low variance winning plays, right? And hopefully like that will bring you to victory, and you don't need to play stuff like Servant of Yogg-Saron.
Yep. And you should never play.
Nope.
I don't think I'll ever play that card. I may draft it, and then I'll just not play it. I'll hold it in my hand for it. Okay, let's move on to a question from the GOAT. I think that's a pretty good overview of like if you're debating between the top two classes. First of all, it's kind of an academic debate. Like it's not, it's a game. Like it helps you understand the game to try to evaluate where these classes are, and it helps you understand these classes so you can play them better, and so you can play against them better. But in the end, in the arena, which one is better doesn't make a practical difference, right? You're happy to see either of them, pick them, and you'll win more than with other classes most likely. Mage is definitely easier to play if you're on the development curve and you're trying to like get like maximize your win rate. It's probably mage and not rogue. If you're good, then it could be rogue or mage depending on which one you're comfortable with. I think from a design perspective right now, from what we're seeing, mage has a slight edge over rogue overall for the average wins per run you'll get with them.
Yep. All right. So, question from the GOAT.
What is it this week?
It is gonna be a Hearthstone question, but with a tinge of Overwatch. So,
okay, are we like phasing this out? So we like start with Overwatch question last week. We're going to do Overwatch-ish question this week. Next week there may be a hint of Overwatch, and then we're back to the arena.
Yeah, basically. All right. So, hopefully your answer will be good because I actually let you know the question this time. If you can import a character from Overwatch into like a hero uh, uh, for Hearthstone, what character would it be?
Okay, so make it into a hero, and I mean like you're talking like a whole new class, like the 10th class.
Yeah. 10th
so
class.
rather than go with like the monk or like the Dark Knight or whatever the WoW classes are, to just take an actual hero from Overwatch and just like give it a new class.
Yep. Exactly.
Like Reinhardt would be like the shield class, right? Or Tracer would be the teleport class, and it just no longer fits into WoW at all.
Yes.
Okay, so we're out of the Warcraft world now. I think will be really interesting. I mean, it's because I think it's the best character design in the entire game of Overwatch, and it is Tracer. She has a very unique, harassing kind of play style where she like pokes at the enemy. You can't catch her. She takes damage. She has to go out of the way and get some healing or whatever. But otherwise, she's very fragile, like almost like roguelike, right? But I don't know how to implement the mechanic very well. So if you guys don't know, her like core mechanic is called Blink, and it basically rewinds her back in time to like places that she used to be, so that she could just disappear on you after like hitting you a couple times. So a lot of stealth mechanics, a lot of ways to like dodge damage, maybe hero power. I want to say, I don't know, some kind of damage mitigation that forces your enemies to attack your minions rather than you.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Cool. My answer is going to be Torbjorn, because I think what they can do is they can make a hero power class. Obviously, your hero power is going to be create a turret, right? But every
Mm-hmm.
single turn, instead of like creating another turret, like create another totem, create another dude, you upgrade your turret. So,
Okay.
for example, like the first time you click your hero power, it'll be like 2 mana, create like an O2 that has, I don't know, 50% chance of dealing 1 damage at the start of your turn, right? Something like that. And then every time you click it, like it upgrades it a little bit, and it either like increases the damage that it deals, or like at a certain point you can direct the damage, and your cards would synergize with the turret, and obviously you'd have other stuff as well. But I think it'd be cool to have like a character that sort of just uses hero power to like build up one thing, right? And look, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
about game design. I don't know how well it would fit, but I think that'd be a cool mechanic that you use your hero power, you buff up this one thing, you try to build up this one thing.
So what do your cards do? What do your class cards do?
I don't know. I haven't thought that far. Come on, man. Come
Because you
on,
have the game
man.
is about releasing new class cards and making the class unique.
Well,
So
yeah. Well, you'd
do
have
all your
other
class
things.
cards buff your turret? Is your turret going to be like Athiuen?
No, it's not going to be Cthulhu. You can make Molten Core or something like that. But no. I mean, I think it would be I think it'd be cool to have sort of a consolidation class, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a class that just focuses on one thing, and you need mechanics to protect it in some way, so it doesn't just get like mass removed
I'm
immediately,
gonna
or
take
not mass,
something.
like removed immediately. But I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah,
Anyways,
I'm gonna take a comment from Twitch chat, which we don't usually do, but this is really good and very relevant. It's from Bash Halading. He says it sounds like one of the tavern brawls to upgrade the staff with Rafam. Remember that one? Where
it
there are
does,
different
yeah.
pieces of the staff, and then they kind of come together and makes your hero power stronger and stronger.
It does, it does. But that's making your hero power stronger. This is using a hero power to make something on the board stronger, right? In terms of like because with that one, it's like you're trying to upgrade your hero power. For
Right.
this one, you're just trying to upgrade. You're using a hero power to upgrade something on the board. Although who knows? Like you can do it the other way
Just
too.
like no class card interaction, man.
Well, no. Look, the class cards would like interact with us somehow. I'm not here to like give you a PowerPoint presentation on exactly
Okay.
how this class
Okay.
would work. Okay, this is
All
question from the
right.
goat.
All
This is
right.
not like PhD thesis time with Overwatch and Merps.
Okay. Okay. Question from the GOAT brought to you by Patreon. Patreon.com/grinninggoat. It's how we support the podcast. Thank you again to all of our patrons. Now let's go to Car Good Bad. So the coup today is Paladin. We're doing Paladin, and we just kind of crapped all over Paladin here about why it's not one of the top classes anymore, or not one of the top two classes anymore, not even in the conversation really. Um, but one thing that did get really good overall is hard removal, right? And instead of picking like assassinate or something else for card good bad and saying obvious things like there are big things, you can remove them. We figure we take the paladin angle because paladins have no hard removal. Paladins cannot take something off of the board. Instead, Paladins get around this by having soft removal. It can humility opponents, which means it can bring your opponent, and it can repentance your opponents. So there are two ways, right? One brings their attack down to one. One is repentance at equality and brings their defense down to one. Bringing their defense down to one is more obvious of a mechanic. But what happens when you bring the attack down to one? So we raised humility by 2 points and outdoor peacekeeper by 4 points in the latest tier list update, where we took into account the how good hard removals are in this meta. So you want to talk a little bit about just how good humility is, how good outdoor peacekeeper. I mean, okay, outdoor peacekeeper is really, really, really good. It is insanely good. We don't really need to talk about why, like how it's so good, but we could talk a little bit about why it is so good and why humility is not rated all that highly by us.
Yeah,
And what their effects are.
yeah. So Outdoor Peacekeeper, we know it's a premium card. Like you're already for -1 stat on the card, you're getting an insane ability, right? Humility itself, and this is card good bad. It's not great, but it's not terrible, right? The problem with humility.
So we're somewhere between a fire elemental and a wisp.
Yes, I'm glad we've narrowed down that range. What a narrow range that is. So the downside to humility, as you know, it's just a small card, right? And sometimes you can get value with it because they have an 8/8 and you have two like 4/4s out on the board, right? You can use a humility to basically save two 4/4s, which is amazing value, right? So it could be
Well, they become 4/3.
yeah, sorry. To say to basically make or preserve
Yeah.
two 4/3s. Yeah. Which is amazing value for 1 mana and is fantastic. But a lot of times, if you don't have the board initiative or if you just, you top deck it, it's just not good. Now, let's think of humility as applied to the current meta, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because people are drafting all these big cards, it will be more valuable because you can get it to hit on something big, right? But at the same time, if we're in a truly value oriented meta, then if you find yourself in those situations where you're not able to have that board lead and then preserve all that stuff, this humility is just a terrible card, right? So
It's
once again,
1 mana for a reason.
yeah. So once again, like humility, it's you look at the application, the meta, you're like, well, the good has like become better almost, but the bad is just like, man, it's a small card in which you need to get that value. So if you look at it in terms of like sort of the bell curve, basically it's become a little bit more polarized. So it's still averaging out to being like a slightly below average card, but the sort of the distribution is a little bit wider, I think.
Yep. That's the answer for why it is where it is. I like the humility is like it doesn't look like it's a buff card. It looks like it's a debuff card, but it works the same way. You need a board. It's basically a buff for the board. It's effectively a buff for the board. If you have nothing on the board, this card it does something, but it doesn't do all that much. If you have enough stuff on the board to kill your target, well, you've basically given your opponent a bunch of life, right? Because you would have hit his face instead. So let's say you put it on a 6/6 or something. Your opponent gets at least 6 more health than they would have otherwise, and you kill the 6/6 and take 1 damage on each of the minions you use to attack it, which is a great card for 1 mana, right? You can't ask for that much more for a 1 mana card. If you don't have the board, or if you don't have enough attack on the board to kill that thing, and you may very well not, because the whole point is that they put out something big on it. So if you're just fighting for the board, you really may not be able to clear it. Well, then your opponent can still buff it. It can use it to remove your 1/1s. It can just harass you. You may not like. This is why bringing your like a hunter's mark is better, right? Because bringing it down to 1 health ensures that if you have anything that deals any little amount of damage, it's a much simpler requirement than humility. Because if you have like even a 2-drop or something, right, you can ensure that that's all that thing takes out. It doesn't get rid of your more valuable minions potentially on the board. It doesn't limit you in terms of what you can do. You don't have to have enough attack on the board to take your opponent out. It's just a much more flexible requirement to get value out of it, as compared to humility.
Yeah, definitely. So humility would be it's a card in which its value will tend to stay the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like what we mentioned with the distribution like the good will always become better and the bad will always become worse. And then depending on how the meta changes, it'll either like go back into a typical bell curve or it'll split. So humility is one of those cards in which kind of like no matter if it goes if the meta goes faster or slower, it won't shift by that much in either
Yeah.
direction, right?
Yeah. Like
But
if it goes too fast, like what you do is you want lower mana cards, and two, you just humility them and go, right? You're not
yes,
like removing their like 1/6 on the board. You're like, all right, I challenge you to buff that, or you get to remove a 1/1 every turn. Good for you, right? Like,
right, right. So, and this is something that we wanted to highlight. I think the fact that yes, we raised it up a little bit, but this is a card in which it is almost not immune, but it is resistant to meta changes. Some cards like are highly dependent on the meta, right? But humility is one of those cards that should stay pretty similar, and outdoor will like always be good universally.
yup. All right, so that's card good bad, where we told you that cards were okay. Let's talk more specifically about the Paladin. I guess we already talked about the Paladin in terms of why it's not the best class, but in the OG, it's not like the Paladin got super terrible. Let's see how are we going to try to play the Paladin? Because we're doing an arena coup right after this with the Paladin, and I think we've said this before, and I want to just stress it again, which is that Paladin is, along with Shaman now, always with Shaman, but now Shamans can actually pull it off more frequently. They're the snowball class, right? Like it's Paladin, it's Shaman, it's Warlock. Warlock snowballs in a weird way, where yeah, they have power overwhelming, which requires a board to attack, but really they snowball with their hero power. Right? You get a board, you hold it, you don't take face damage, and your engine is your hero power that gets you a whole card of card advantage every turn. Paladin and Shaman are more traditional snowball classes where you get a board, you make it big, and then you buff stuff. Um, Priest is also kind of a snowball class, but really can only keep one thing alive. It's very questionable about it, but you also have some elements of it. And the idea with the snowball class or a snowball deck is that you put stuff out, you make sure they never remove your stuff, and then you find a way to get value out of the stuff. That could be through buffing the stuff, which is the most common way to snowball, or it could be with being able to utilize your hero power a lot better, such as Priest and Warlock, or it could be with being able to keep something alive a lot better. Because in the arena, your opponent really just isn't going to have that many removals. So if you can keep, because you have snowballed, because you have set up so well on the board that you can keep a Demolisher, which is not a great card, but if you can even just keep that alive for 5 turns, you kind of win the game, assuming decent RNG, right? Because it'll just deal so much more damage than its mana is worth. And it won't get that unless you can keep it alive. And you can't keep it alive without a board. Like, yeah, sure, you could have a million removals, but that's realistically not going to happen for 90% of your decks. So the snowball kind of class, which got you guys all know what I'm talking about because it got a lot of prominence in with the Inspire mechanic in TGT, and it got a little out of control with the Paladin. But it's still there. You still snowball with it, and you're trying to build that deck right from the get-go. You're trying to do it, and if you can't do it, you end up in the mid-range deck, or you end up with an attrition deck, or you end up with like an aggressive deck. But you're trying to find a way to allow your deck to snowball because that is ultimately what the Paladin does.
It's kind of creepy how similar shamans and paladins are now in terms of power level and in terms of their win condition, right?
Yep.
Although it is a little bit different. When we define both of them as snowball, paladin is singular snowball, right? In which they buff up
Mm-hmm.
one minion with a Seal of Champs or with a Blessing of Kings. Shaman is sort of spread out snowball, right? Like they totem a lot, they have a lot of stuff, and they either evolve it, they either Thunderbolt Valiant, or they Flame Tongue totem, right? They're not
Bloodlust.
Yeah, Bloodlust, although that you typically don't see that card as often. But with Shamans, it's really efficient removals to protect all of their small stuff. Capitalize on the fact that AoE clear is pretty rare now. And, kind of win off of that. With Paladins, it's also, hey, capitalize on the fact that removals are pretty rare now. And it's like, you got to clear my stuff every single turn, and I'm going to snowball off of that one turn in which you let like a single 1/1 live, right? So it's they've gotten really similar in terms of the way that they play, and they've always played pretty similarly. But now, like Shamans used to, not be able to get on the board, like. And now that both of them can get on the board, in which I would say about the same rate ish, um, that's sort of where you see like their power levels becoming very similar.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Because your win conditions are what determines whether you win, right? Like outside of card quality. So when you have similar win conditions and you're getting to have more similar card quality, you're kind of becoming a very similar two classes. They still have their flavors. I don't think there's that much convergence going on, but in this meta, it is that you're trying to do vaguely the same thing with those two classes. And it's familiar, right? This is not like aggro control, where mages used to be able to aggro control, druids used to be able to aggro control a little. These days, it's really just rogue. Like, mage can kind of do it. Druids, you gotta really luck out. Shamans can do it too, but again, you have to like really look out, and you may need a whirlwind or something. But with control, with snowball, you still have a lot of classes. So if you're someone that plays all classes evenly, or you like the class diversity, this is something to pick up. And paladins are still the best at it, so it's a very good place to start honing your skills. And of course, it's a very new player friendly kind of class. For this different playstyle than mage, right? That's why they start you out with mage, and then you have a very natural transition to paladin, and then you've kind of got a good feel of the game from that point on, right? Everything else is kind of a variation on that, or it's something really weird like the warrior, which I don't know, maybe you can think of the warrior as a variation on rogue. Either way, like there's nothing quite like the hunter out there, but as far as the other classes go, or like I think Hunter and Warrior are the two unique classes, the most unique classes in Hearthstone. But the other ones all follow big picture, archetype, big picture, win condition things, and that's where the Paladin fits. And it's a good time for Snowball still, right? Like it's a good meta for it. It's just a little harder to get it going.
Yep, definitely. All right. I think it's about time that we stopped talking about Paladin and started playing.
Play some Paladin. All right. That's it for the Lightforge for today. We'll see you next week. If you're watching live, tune in. We'll start out the Arena Coop right after this. So see you guys next week.
See you guys.